from chapter 6. It's April 1964. The day room air hung heavy, dense with the body odor that comes with waiting for bad news. As all 20 of us settled in, the atmosphere was hushed. Even Ellen, who ordinarily spoke loudly to anyone who would listen and usually ended up talking to herself, was silent. Laurie and May weren't poking each other or rolling their eyes. They huddled on the small rust-colored sofa, legs folded under them. Their sallow faces echoed the pale walls. At the edge of the circle of patients waiting for Miss Riley, our head nurse, to speak, I sat cross-legged with my arms locked around my chest, rocking. Some of you may be aware that Bella has not returned to 6 South following her medical stay at Presbyterian across the street, Miss Riley began. Because I knew you might be wondering where Bella is, I called this community meeting to let you know that she's been transferred to Rockland. Several gasps and at least one person's sobs, along with subdued murmurings of, "Oh God," and "I told you," and "shit," broke our silence. But those outbursts didn't convey the level of fear reverberating throughout the room. I felt as if I were watching a large gasoline can slide toward an open flame. Something terrible was about to happen. Last month, Bella had swallowed poison at her lab job up on the 8th floor. She didn't tell anyone, which gave the poison hours to work before she collapsed at the end of an early evening bridge game. As her partner, I'd noticed that she was unusually quiet and that her skin had an odd greenish sheen, but I never guessed what she had done. Her plan almost succeeded. Bella spent a week in ICU before it was certain that she'd live. After that, the doctors didn't want her at PI anymore. I'd sensed that her transfer was coming, but I still couldn't believe it. Bella had been one of my 2 closest friends on 6 South, the kind of friend who saw things the way I did. I didn't have to explain myself to feel understood. Marie had been the other. Marie was a student nurse at Bloomingdale's during my stay there, someone I'd appreciated as an individual. Respectful, too. She didn't treat us like dumb animals to be herded around, or poisonous snakes that might bite. One day, after I'd been at PI for a few months, Miss Riley told us to expect a new patient. I was stunned when Marie walked in. It took me a few seconds to figure out where I knew her from, and by then she'd recognized me too. We ran and grabbed each other with happy hugs and squeals, the way girls do. I was so delighted to see her that for a moment I didn't register that this was, in fact, bad news. Marie was being admitted to a mental hospital. Most of the time she looked darkly troubled and kept to herself. Patients on 6 South abided by an unofficial rule not to ask each other about problems. Marie never volunteered personal information, so I didn't know what made her so despondent. When we talked, it was about our cats, or our favorite books, or what kind of birds we'd be, if we could choose. In February, Marie killed herself by jumping off the George Washington Bridge. She had run away, eloped was the hospital term for it, and never returned. The police found her body downstream. Even though I'd known other patients who had done that before her, it was hard for me to accept that Marie was gone. The loss weighed me down, as if a heavy shadow had settled over my heart. Eventually, I became numb when I thought of her. Thinking about Marie's death after news of Bella's transfer set my heart hammering in my chest. What if I never saw Bella again? I followed the last stragglers out of the day room and into the hall. Grotesque images of gargoyles and monsters flashed before me nonstop. I moved closer to the nurses' station, as if proximity to the staff would help hold me together. I began to hop from one foot to the other, unable to stand still. I was trying to stay ahead of the enormous energy racing inside of me. Faster and faster I hopped. Then gasoline hit the flame. I blew. Exploding bits of mountains and trees, dogs and cats, rivers and buffaloes, dead faces with arms and legs came raining down on me. I dug my fingernails into my cheeks. Stinging scratches, speckled scarlet where the nails cut through, streaked down my face. Blood glistened on my fingertips. I clenched my teeth deep into my skin, leaving marks. The explosions wouldn't stop. I threw my head against the wall with all my force to counter the flaming assault. Through the fire, 2 male aides and a nurse appeared. They grabbed my hands and shoved me into a large canvas jacket that opened in back. The men wrapped my arms tightly across my chest so I couldn't move them and tied the sleeves behind me. I was forced to hug myself with no end. The nurse pushed me down the hall. I resisted, but not for long. I couldn't breathe. Deflated lungs made me collapse in on myself, and I ended up curled into a ball on the floor. I was inside the quiet room. Shabby white quilted pads covered the walls. A rubber mat lined the floor space. It smelled like sneakers rotted from stinking feet. A mattress lay on the floor on the side of the room farthest from the door. A crowd of staff stood outside the door looking at me, talking among themselves in words I couldn't make sense of. Then they moved aside for the doctor on call. It was Dr. Roberts. He spoke to me, but I ignored him. I stayed in my ball. He spoke again. After a long wait, I looked up. I felt desperately unreal, untethered in space, reeking with shame. "You know, Anita," he said, "I think you must be enjoying this." His words ricocheted inside of me and would have set off another explosion, except I had nothing left. I was empty. I have to make this not be happening, I thought. I will stop time. I can do that. I held absolutely still. If I didn't move, perhaps I would be absorbed into another dimension. Nothing changed. Summoning my very last molecule of breath, I made my voice calm. "Please go away." Dr. Roberts stood, thinking, then turned to leave. The staff stepped aside as he walked out. The lock on the heavy metal door, with its little wire-embedded window in the center, clicked shut behind him.